August 26, 1346. The sky above northern France hung heavy on gray, a storm waiting to break. Below, in a sea of mud near, a small village called Crécy, 9,000 exhausted English soldiers stood in silence. Across the field, 30,000 French knights gleamed like a moving wall of steel on pride. The banners rippled in the wind, blue, red, gold, each a symbol of centuries of inherited glory. To the French, this wasn't a battle, it was a ceremony. The flower of European nobility was gathered here to crush an upstart island king. Princes, dukes, kings, all ready to ride for Enna. Some even argued over who would claim Edward III head. But as thunder rolled over the fields, destiny shifted. When the day began, the world still believed that courage was measured by bloodline, that armor could buy immortality. When the sun set, 1,500 nobles would lie dead in the mud, and the idea of chivalry itself would rot beside them. This was not just a battle. It was the death of an era. And it ended not with swords, but with arrows, fired by peasants who practiced every Sunday after church. This was Crécy. If you love stories where history turns in a single heartbeat, like, subscribe, and stay with us. Europe in the mid-14th century was a chessboard of kings. Every piece was carved from blood and inheritance, every move made in the name of good and greed. But no player was hungrier than Edward III of England. Through his mother's line, he claimed the crown of France itself. And when the French king, Philip V, dismissed that claim, Edward answered not with words, but with fire. In the summer of 1346, his army landed in Normandy like a storm. Villages burned. Grain fields turned to ash. Monasteries looted. It wasn't war, it was humiliation. A message written in smoke: the French king can't protect his own land. For weeks, the English army ravaged northern France, a campaign known as a chevauchée, a rite of destruction meant to break morale, not just biddies. Behind them trailed the smell of smoke and fear. Ahead of them waited the largest army Europe had ever seen. Philip V gathered an army fit for 30 to 35,000 men, including 12,000 armored knights. Princes from every corner of the continent rode beside him, the Holy Roman Empire, Bohemia, Moravia, each bearing banners bright as fire. The King of Bohemia himself came, though blind, to witness glory one last time. They were the tanks of their age, steel-clad men and horses so weighed down with armor that each charge shook the earth. They gear cost more than a village could earn in a lifetime. They believed themselves untouchable, God's chosen warriors. For 5 centuries, cavalry charges had decided every major battle. Infantry existed only to die beneath hooves. To face such an army with a force of tired men and starving archers seemed madness. Edward's troops numbered perhaps 15,000 when they landed: farmers, sailors, thieves, and mercenaries. But they carried something new, something quietly revolutionary: the longbow. A simple, 6-foot stave of yew wood, unadorned, brutal, and devastating. In the right hands, it could send a yard-long arrow 250 yards, punching through armor or horseflesh alike. Each man could fire 12 arrows a minute, an unending storm of wood and iron. And these weren't soldiers born to privilege. They were villagers who'd been forced by English law to practice archery every Sunday after church. Generations of muscle memory, generations of precision. When Edward's army reached the northern coast, near the port of Calais, exhaustion and pursuit forced them to stop. Behind them, the French host thundered closer, 3 times their number, fresh, furious, and hungry for vengeance. In the night before battle, Edward chose his ground near a small village called Crécy, a gentle hill overlooking a shallow valley. There, he placed his archers in a V-shaped formation, 2 wings stretching out like open arms. Between them, his men-at-arms and dismounted knights stood ready. The archers' overlapping fields of fire would create a wall of arrows impossible to breach. Then came the command that shocked everyone. Edward ordered his knights to dismount. The elite of England, trained since childhood to charge on horseback, now stood shoulder to shoulder with peasants in the mud. It was more than a tactic, it was heresy against the very order of the medieval world. For centuries, nobility had been defined by height, and a horse above the common man. Edward brought them down to earth. Literally. While his men dug trenches and drove sharpened stakes into the ground to stop cavalry, the French army was still in the march, disorganized on drunken pride. They expected the English to flee before their splendor. Instead, they found a silent line of men waiting calmly in the rain. In one side, discipline, preparation, and quiet resolve. In the other, arrogance, noise, and the blinding belief that glory could not die. The storm was almost here, and when it broke, it would sweep away more than armies. It would erase an entire way of life. Night fell over Crecy like a warning. The rain came softly at first, a whisper across the tents, before deepening into a steady drumbeat in canvas and armor. In the English camp, the sound was almost peaceful. Fires burned low. Men rubbed beeswicks into bowstrings to keep them dry. Stakes were hammered into the wet ground, angled outward, fangs waiting for horses. By torchlight, ditches were dug where the French cavalry would surely charge. Edward III moved among his soldiers, calm, methodical, speaking swiftly to captains, checking lines himself. Chroniclers later said he ordered ale and meat distributed so every man went to sleep with a full stomach. He wanted them to rest, not fear. Across the valley, there was no rest. The French army, delayed by rain and arrogance, stumbled into camp at midnight after a forced march. Hungry, soaked, and exhausted, they found no plan, no discipline, only case disguised as confidence. Every noble wanted to lead. Every banner wanted to be first. Trumpets blared. Armor clunked. Voices shouted over one another in a metallic chorus of pride. The King of France, Philip Vidi, tried to impose order. But his commands were drowned in the din of arguments, counts boasting they would capture the English king before sunset, dukes laughing that they'd ransom his son for sport. It was less an army than a carnival. When dawn came on August 26th, the sky was a pale smear of gray. The English lines were still, dark shapes in the hillside. Below, the French army glittered in the new light, a living ocean of metal. They had every advantage: numbers, armor, prestige. And that was their curse. The vanguard moved first, the genus crossbowmen, 5,000 of the best mercenary marksmen in Europe. Their jibs softened the English lines before the knights charged. But something was wrong. Their large shields, the pavesses they hid behind to reload, were still far behind with the baggage train. On their bowstrings, made of hemp and sinew, had soaked up the night's rain, stretching unslackening. In the English hill, archers calmly pulled dry strings from under their helmets. They restrung their bows, necked arrows into the wet earth before them, and waited. Philip gave the order, drums thundered. The Genos advanced. At 150 yards, they loosed their first volley. The bolts arced high, and fell short, hissing into the mud. Then came the reply, a single sound like tearing canvas, like thunder breaking inside the clouds. 5,000 lingbows sang at once. 60,000 arrows screamed across the sky. Witnesses said the air turned black, a storm of feathers and iron. Men on horses vanished beneath it. Every 5 seconds, another volley, another wave of death. The Genos faltered, tried to reload, realized their soaked strings were useless, and broke, fleeing backward. From the rear, a furious shout rose above the case. Kill this rabble that blocks our way. It was the Count of Alençon, unable to bear the shame of retreat. French knights spurred forward, charging directly into their own mercenaries, trampling them, cutting them down. The Genos died where they ran, slaughtered by the very nobles who had hired them. The English kept firing. The arrows didn't care who they struck, mercenary or noble. They only obeyed physics. Behind the collapsing front, more French banners surged forward. Trumpets blared. Armor crashed against armor as 12,000 mounted knights began their ascent up the hill, through mud, corpses, and the falling rain of arrows. It wasn't a battle yet. It was momentum and ego colliding. The ground shook as 1,000 war horses pounded forward, hooves striking mud like drums of doom. But they didn't charge across open fields, only through a nightmare of pits on sharpened stakes. The first horses fell screaming, impaled. Others slipped in the wet earth, throwing riders into case. Still they came. In the English ranks, archers fired without pause. They had trained their whole lives for this rhythm. Draw, M, loose. Draw, M, loose. Their arms burned, their fingers bled, but the sky stayed black with arrows. Each impact was a hammer in steel, a blunt check that cracked ribs beneath armor. At ling range, the arrows punched through horseflesh. At close range, through visor slits, armpits, thighs. A knight's fortune, a lifetime of training, a family crest, none of it mattered. Wave after wave climbed that hill, each one dying faster than the last. The Englishmen fought beside their king, calm and silent. The French nobles screamed their titles to the sky, desperate that good might be listening. As the field turned red on slick beneath the rain, even the crows circling above seemed to hesitate, as if unsure way to land. What began as a march for glory had become a pilgrimage to death. On the mud of Crécy was hungry. The bottle of Crécy had become a storm without reason. By late afternoon, the air was thick with rain, smoke, on the iron tongue of blood. What began as strategy had dissolved into case, thousands of armored men on beasts trapped in mud, climbing over the dead to die again. The first wave of French knights never reached the English line. The horses, pierced by arrows on broken stakes, screamed and collapsed. Those who survived the fall struggled to stand, trapped in armor that now weighed like stone. Behind them, the second wave crashed forward, into the wreckage of men and animals, into confusion so dense it choked movement itself. From the English hill came the unending rhythm of the longbow, draw, loose. Draw, loose. Each villy whistled like wind through iron reeds, cutting down both courage on flesh. Some arrows didn't pierce armor, but they didn't need to. Each impact struck with the force of a hammer, staggering knights, denting breastplates, shattering ribs. 1,000 little concussions building into panic. Even those who lived found themselves blinded by fear, the realization that the world they ruled was turning against them. At one point, the English archers ran out of arrows. And then something almost biblical happened. They ran down the hill, into the slaughter, pulling arrows from the corpses of the French, snapping them free from eyes, necks, and joints, and firing them back. The French were dying by their own steel, their own pride, recycled against them. Hour after hour, the rain fell. The French charged 16 times, 16 suicidal waves. Each one weaker, more desperate, more insane than the last. Every time, the hill became steeper, not because it rose, but because it was piled with biddies. Among the madness rode King Jin of Bohemia, blind for nearly a decade, yet unwilling to die in bed. When he learned that the battle was lost, he called for his knights. The King of Bohemia does not flee, he said. Lead me to where the fight is fiercest. They tied their horses' reins to his so that he could ride with them, and together, bound by loyalty and blindness, they charged. Imagine it, a 50-year-old king, sightless, swinging his sword into darkness, guided only by sound and memory. He struck once, twice, hitting shadows, hitting ghosts until arrows found him. When the biddies were discovered later, his knights were still bound together by the same reins. Their armor dented, their faces turned toward the enemy, the hands locked in their swords. Jin had died as, he wished not retreating, but reaching. Edward, the Three's son, the Prince of Wales, later known as the Black Prince, found the biddy. Moved by the king's courage, he took Jin's emblem 3 ostrich feathers on the words "Ec Dean, I serve." To this day, it remains the symbol of the Prince of Wales. By sunset, the rain had stopped. What replaced it was worse, a silence heavy as the grave. Across the field, the French royal banner, the sacred aeroflamme that promised divine victory, lay trampled in mud. The king himself, Philip VI, had joined the final charge. An arrow pierced his jaw, shattering bone. His horse went down beneath him. He had to be dragged from the field by his guards, bleeding and screaming to return. Even then, the French didn't stop. Their nobles fought each other for the honor of dying first. The flower of Europe's aristocracy, dukes, counts, princes, all crushed into a single choking mass. Each wave destroyed itself before even reaching the enemy. The English line barely moved. They fought side by side, knights and peasants indistinguishable in the mud. When they ran out of arrows for the final time, they switched to hammers, knives, and wooden stakes. Peasants beat nobles to death with sticks. The social order of Europe shattered blow by blow, in real time, under gray skies. By nightfall, Edward's army stood in stunned disbelief. They had survived the impossible. 9,000 men against 30,000, and they had won. They spent the night where they stood, among the corpses. Any movement in the dark, any groan or breath, was silenced with a knife. No prisoners, no ransom. Chivalry ended there, in the cold mud, beneath a sky that no longer favored kings. When dawn came, the scope of the slaughter revealed itself. Biddies stretched across the field in grotesque mosaics of color, blue silk, gold thread, crimson velvet, the funeral garments of Europe's elite. Over 1,500 nobles were dead princes, dukes, counts, the lords of France. So many that there weren't enough men of rank left to bury them. For days, the crows feasted. Chroniclus wrote that they grew so fat they could no longer fly, hopping from biddy to biddy, wings too heavy to lift. One English knight dead for every 750 French nobles. It seemed impossible. Some said it was divine judgment, but the truth was simpler. On faculda, it was mathematics. A 10-shilling weapon had defeated armor worth 1,000 pounds. Skill had beaten privilege. Discipline had beaten pride. The mud of Crecy didn't just swallow men. It swallowed an idea. That birth determined worth. That courage could outweigh strategy. That faith alone could deflect an arrow. And as the smoke cleared, the age of the night, 5 centuries of dominance, lay dead beside its kings. When the sun rose over Crecy, in August 27th, it revealed more than a battlefield. It revealed the death of an illusion. For 500 years, Europe had worshipped a single image, the mounted knight, shining in armor, charging into destiny. That morning, the armor lay split unrusted, the horses motionless, the sky silent except for the soft croak of crows. The English parked their gear and marched toward Calais, too stunned to celebrate. They hadn't just won, they had witnessed a transformation. The longbow, a weapon of peasants, had torn through centuries of divine hierarchy. Every arrow loosed at Crecy was a vote against the old world, against the belief that birth made men brave. Across France, panic rippled through noble families. Entire bloodlines were gone in a day. Castles without lords, estates without heirs. The feudal system itself cracked, as if struck by an invisible hammer. The French military scrambled to rebuild, hiring crossbowmen, imitating the very tactics they had mucked. But the wound was deeper than strategy. It was spiritual. If a Welsh criminal could kill a French prince, what did that say about Gid's chosen order? If courage could live in Chimeras, what, then, was nobility? The Battle of Crecy didn't just change warfare. It changed meaning. Inna no longer rode in horseback. It marched in foot, bow in hand, beside hunger and discipline. In the years that followed, the longbow reigned supreme, until gunpowder arrived, and it too became obsolete. The weapon that killed chivalry was itself slain by progress. But Crecy's echo never faded. It still whispers through every revolution that followed. That power built in arrogance will one day meet its arrow. History doesn't always fade quietly. Sometimes, it ends in thunder, in arrows falling like rain, in kings dragged down into the same mud as their men. Crecy was one of those moments. A reminder that courage belongs to no class, and that every empire, no matter how proud, eventually meets its reckoning. If you believe the past still speaks, in courage, in failure, in the stubborn will to survive, then walk with us into the stories time tried to bury. Subscribe. Remember, because history is never just about the dead, it's about us, still learning to stand in the rain.